studio engineers. Thanks for checking out the Home Recording Network. And if you are here, you're probably in the same spot that I was in 15 years ago, wondering, how can I get better home studio mixes? Maybe your songs are turning out muddy, lacking the clarity that your favorite bands and artists have. Maybe the instruments in your song are lacking separation and everything just kind of blends together to create this wall of music that doesn't necessarily sound bad, but you just know that it can be better. And while I can't just tell you that one magic secret that's going to suddenly turn you into a professional engineer, I do want to share with you 3 tips that I wish somebody would have told me when I started out. And if you're not already using these 3 simple techniques, this info should actually clean up those muddy mixes in minutes. Now, if you find this video helpful, please be sure to like and subscribe, as any support is extremely helpful as I grow my channel and allows me to keep making these videos. Okay, so first I'm going to show you a couple clips from this song that was recently recorded and mixed in my home studio, and this was working with amateur musicians and inexpensive gear. I'm going to show you a little bit of the verse here, but just listen for the clarity of all the instruments.
Take it all in. You do what you can.
Okay, so you might think there's not a lot going on in that verse. Of course, everything's crystal clear. But let's check out a really heavy part at the end of the song. Everything is still very in your face, and everything is still punching, even though there's a lot going on. But I'll play this part and do some soloing so you can hear the individual instruments.
Poisonous to me. Your words are poisonous to me. Poisonous to me. Your words mean nothing more to me. Nothing more to me. I'm on my feet and sickness free. And the nightmares all over.
So even with all that's going on in this section, we still have clarity with all the parts, even though there's multiple guitar parts going on, some crazy backup vocals and lead vocals and punchy drums, but everything still cuts through. And that's because of the simple techniques that I'm going to lay out. Now, obviously, there's a lot that goes into a mix like this, other than just 3 tips that I'm going to give you. But that's what all my videos are about. I try to give out all of my best info. So if you have any specific questions, be sure to ask and I'll make a video for you. But this first tip is a real simple one, and you might already be using it. You may not be, but if you aren't, you should start doing this immediately, because all good mixes start with this: high and low frequency roll-offs. This is essential if you don't want your mixes to be muddy or lack clarity. So let's take this chorus vocal, the main chorus vocal. The first thing that I do to this track, the first EQ move, is to roll off all the low end. And if we play this track, you can see all the frequencies that are being rolled off below 100 hertz here.
Your words are poisonous to me. It's a chemical emotionless retreat.
And you might say, well, Joel, there's not a lot going on down there below 100 hertz. And you're right, there's not, but let's actually take a listen to everything we're rolling off. I hope you're listening on some headphones or some studio monitors so you can hear this.
Your words are poisonous to me. It's a chemical emotionless retreat.
So there actually is a good amount of low end buildup in this vocal that we can just cut out. We don't need that cluttering up our mixes. So if you take this technique and apply it across all your tracks, you're gonna see some results. Now, the frequency roll off is obviously gonna differ across all your tracks. Different instruments, go down further in frequency than a vocal does. But as a rule of thumb, vocals should be around 100 hertz. You should roll off to 100 hertz, maybe for a female, a little bit higher, 120 or so. But if we take a look at any of the other tracks in this mix, they all have this low end roll off happening, and in some cases, even a high end roll off. So if we take a look at the kick in microphone, I have the SSL EQ on here instead of the graphical EQ, but we still have our high and low pass filter up here. And for the low end, we're rolling off everything below 40 hertz. And then on the high end, we're rolling off everything above 12K because frankly, there's no useful information above 12K on a kick drum. All of this unneeded information and all these unneeded frequencies are just going to add to that wall of noise that I was talking about in the beginning. If we don't need something, cut it out. So if your mixes are muddy, start with this high and low roll off on all of your tracks. And my mix guide has most of these frequency areas in it. So in the description of this video, just click to download my mix guide. It's free and check it out. I know this may sound like a simple technique, but this is how good mixes start. And if you want your mixes to sound clear and punchy and have clarity, then this is honestly the first thing you should be doing. So let's move on to the second tip, which is to EQ your reverb. But not only to EQ your reverbs, actually use less reverb in your mixes. So I see a lot of people that just like to slap a ton of reverb on maybe their vocal tracks or guitar tracks, and it actually is ruining their mixes. Your guitar tracks, your vocal tracks, you should get them sounding good before even adding reverb on them. So if you're trying to hide a bad track by covering it up with reverb, that's not going to work. It's actually going to muddy up your song even more and create that wall of noise that I keep talking about. So you should be focusing on making your tracks sound great before you even throw reverb on them. So we're going to focus on the vocal track for this example, and I'm just going to solo it for you. And you're going to notice there's some reverb on it, but it's not in your face. It's kind of in the background, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do.
And take it all in. You do what you can.
So that reverb is giving the vocal track some space, but we're not overdoing it by any means. And I'm going to show you how to do that. First of all, I just want to say never just slap a reverb on the vocal track. Always use a send so that you can have a separate track and fader to mess with so that you can work on this reverb instead of just setting it and forgetting it. If you're a Logic user and you want to know more about using buses and sends in Logic, you can check out my video on that topic. But let's talk about this reverb send that we have going on down here. So the reverb plugin that we have on here is just Illustrious Plates. You can use any reverb you want, but the important thing is that you don't have too long of a tail on the reverb. Most I like to go is 3 seconds or so. I don't want this reverb echoing for super long, muddying up my mix even more. So usually I'm around a 2-second tail on the reverb itself. But the most important part of this send is the EQ that comes after it. And this is something that I do on every single one of my reverb sends. I like to roll off the high end of my reverbs because this actually makes the reverb sound a little bit further away and almost bigger. And the reason this is because in the real world, when we hear something from far away, the high end is not reaching our ears because high end dies off. If you ever heard music from far away, you can usually hear the bass and the low end from the kick drum. So by rolling off the high end of this reverb, we're almost tricking the listener into thinking that the reverb is further away. And because of this, it actually kind of sounds bigger. So right now I'm just going to solo the reverb with this EQ off, and then I'll bring it in and just listen how much further away it sounds.
Take it all in. You do what you can.
That sounds cool, right? And the thing that I love about this trick is we're not cluttering up our mix with all the high end from this reverb. It's actually going to make the reverb less noticeable, which is what you want. So again, this is going to gain some frequency room in the higher frequency areas. But the thing is, I do this on all of my reverb sends. But also, there's just not a ton of reverb in this song. I mean, there's a little bit on the drums, a little bit on the guitars, but that's basically it. This vocal reverb is basically the main reverb in the song, which is usually the case for my mixes, which makes the mixes come across super clean and just super clear. So now let's move on to the third and final tip, and that is to almost over compress your tracks. Now, all the music out there today is heavily compressed. So it makes sense that we need to do this to match up to all the music that's out there. And because a compressor works on the loudest frequencies in the track, if you have low end buildup, it's going to compress that first. So we can almost use this flattening tool of compression to almost mold our vocals into a better tone. If you want more information specifically on this heavy compression on vocals, check out my other video because I have a nice video on that. But let's take a look at this chorus vocal track. There's actually more compression going on with this track than it looks like. Because I'm fortunate enough to have an Apollo unit, I can compress my vocals on the way in while I'm recording them. So I probably had about 10 to 12 dBs of gain reduction going on while this was being recorded. But as soon as we got to the mixing stage, I'm hitting it up with the compressor on the SSL here. We're getting some gain reduction.
Your words are poisonous to me.
And this is actually a fast attack, which is unusual for vocals, but I like a little subtle compression with a fast attack with the SSL specifically to cut down the peaks. And then we also have the FG2A on here giving some gain reduction as well.
Your words are poisonous to me.
So combined with all these compressors, we probably have at least 20 dB of gain reduction going on. Now, if you want my compression settings for all my tracks, be sure to, again, download my mix guide that's in the description of this video. Now, we also have some multiband compression going on with this vocal, as well as some saturation plugins, which sort of compress a vocal in their own way. But overall, heavy compression is helping to make this mix as crispy and as clear as it is. Now, these tips should help you get your mixes sounding clearer and less muddy. But if you have any other questions, just reach out to me and I'd be happy to make a video showing things a little bit more in depth. Hey guys, if you found this video helpful, be sure to download your free home studio mix guide with your go-to EQ and compression settings for all your tracks. Also, feel free to register for my free online mix training that I hold a couple times a week so you can learn how to make radio quality music from your home without breaking the bank.